Hello and welcome to video 10 of the Different Angle 3D video tutorial series. This is the start of the practical in Blender. The previous video we looked at using GIMP to create a reference image so we can model a fairly simple barn structure. The type of structure we're going to work through on this is quite common to a number of different buildings, so any metal clad building is around this sort of design. We're going to change from the portal frame pitched roof to a curved roof just to use extra tools. If you've been through all of the videos, you should find this very easy to follow through, possibly do yourself alongside the video as a first model. If you've just joined at this point, you should also be able to follow it, but you may not understand exactly what's going on, and I'd certainly advise you to go back over the getting started videos. With that said, we'll get straight into the tutorial. Okay, I've opened up Blender and we're now in the default scene as soon as you've got rid of the splash screen by clicking anywhere on the screen. And we've got the cube sitting on the world origin, which is the centre point between the X, Y and Z axis. So it's at position X0, Y0, Z0. And it's also the 3D cursor is also sitting in that position as well. So the first thing we need to do is turn the cube into a shape that represents a rolled steel joist RSJ. And if you watched the previous video where we made a reference image, you'd see I took some photos of my hand in front of the side, two sides of the RSJ. So I've got a rough size reference between the two, and measuring back from those images, the RSJ has got a sort of ratio of 1 to 0.655 between the two sides. So we need to first of all go into edit mode and then scale the cube to that ratio. So you can go into edit mode either by using the drop downs in the top left hand corner, or just press tab on the keyboard, which takes you into edit mode. And then we need to scale on the x-axis by 0.655, and to do that we just press the S key to scale, then the X key to constrain it to the x-axis, and then anywhere on the either numpad or on the number keys above the letters, type in 0.655 and enter. So that then gives us the cube that's now been turned into a rectangle on the XY plane, and that rectangle represents the depth and width of the RSJ. Next we need to inset the sides, but first of all it's easier to work symmetrically across the middle. So we can cut a loop of vertices around the y-axis of the cube. So click on loop cut. The shortcut for this is Control R, but my screen recorder has took control of that one, so I'm using the menu, and it gives you an indication of where the loop cut will be. So we'll click on that to make the loop cut and then enter, and we've got the loop cut around the cube. Go back into select, and that gives us a center line. If we go into numpad 7 for top view, you'll see it's dead over the y-axis. So the next thing is to cut a couple of edges that we can make a face that we inset back in. So if we go into edge select mode at the very top left of the screen again, and click on that and zoom into the cube and just select the top edge and the bottom edge of the face, and then right click to bring up the context menu and click on subdivide. That gives us one edge in the middle, so if we open up the subdivide panel we can increase that to 2 edges. So we've now got 2 edges, so 3 faces on that side. The middle face will be inset back, but first of all we need to scale that out towards the outer edge. I'm going to go back into vertex select mode and then go into top view, and also if you press Z on the keyboard you can go into the wire view, wireframe. So that allows us to see the new vertices and edges we've created. So if you deselect everything and then box select over those vertices, it selects both the top and bottom when you box select in wireframe mode. So go back to numpad 7, so we're on the top. What we need to do is scale those on the y-axis until they're equivalent to 8mm, which is the width of the side of the RSJ. We can just use a reference off the grid for that. So first of all, again, it's the scale command, so press S for scale. This time press Y to constrain it to the y-axis, and then scale those vertices until they're just inside the first grid from the outer edges, and that gives us a face that's the correct size to inset back in. Now Blender 2.9 comes with a new extrude tool, which is extrude manifolds. If you click on the extrude tool and hold with the left mouse button, you've got extrude manifold as a second option. If you click on that, you'll see you've got a widget that allows you to push that face in. So again, in top view, numpad 7, just zoom in and drag that in to around just a third of the first cube that's on the center line. So we've inset it all the way in. That gives us the first side of the RSJ. The second side, we're not going to use that. If we go back into the select mode and just select the 4 vertices of the opposite side, we can delete those, press X and then delete vertices. So we've now got one side of the RSJ sitting over the 3D cursor and the center point or the world origin. So this side we can now tidy up a little by putting some radiuses on the inner and outer corners. So again, I'll press Z and go into solid because it's easier to see, and again go into edge select mode and select the 2 inner corners. So you left mouse button click select the first edge, shift left mouse button click the second edge, and then the shortcut for bevel, or you can just click on the bevel icon on the tool panel. But the shortcut is Control B to open that, and then just drag the mouse slightly, and you can, as you drag it, you can turn the scroll wheel a couple of times just to turn it into a radius rather than a chamfer on the inner corner, and then do exactly the same again on the inner edges on the outer side of the RSJ. So select and then shift select the 2 edges, Control B to bevel, drag the mouse slightly, and it's already remembered that we're using more cuts on there, so accept that by clicking it again. And we've got one side of the RSJ. The back's hollowed out because we've taken the vertices off, so it's no longer a solid closed mesh. But what we can do now is mirror that side over the center line of the RSJ. So in top view, press number 7 again, we need to go into the 3D cursor as the pivot point. So select on the pivot point drop down for 3D cursor. And what this allows us to do is select all the vertices, so select everything and then copy them. So to copy an object, we duplicate it in Blender, so you use the shortcut Shift D, and that gives you a second version. But before you click anything, press escape, and it sits over the top of the original object. We can now mirror the copied section of the RSJ across the x-axis, and to do this we use the shortcut Control M for mirror, and then X as the axis that we're mirroring on. So, and then press enter to accept it, and we've now got the RSJ both sides of the centre line. The problem we've got at the moment is if we go into vertex select mode, you'll see that the two halves aren't joined together. So if we just select one vertex that's on the centre line and press G to grab it, they're not actually connected to both sides. So to solve this, we can merge any duplicated vertices where you've got two vertices sitting on the same spot. So again, we'll select all. So we're selecting every vertex and then press M as the shortcut to merge, and we choose by distance. And this has removed at the bottom of the screen 4 vertices, which are the 4 vertices on the centre line. So that's cleaned it up into a single object that's now watertight. But also when you mirror the direction of the face normals. And we spoke about face normals in the getting started videos. And if I just show the normal face normals, you'll see that on the original side the face normals are pointing out, but on the new side, if I go into top view and Z for wireframe, you'll see that they're on pointing to the inside of the object rather than pointing to the outside of the object. So we need to correct that, and to switch the face normals we use the shortcut Shift N, and this recalculates all the face normals to the outside where it can. So again, if you go into 7 now, there's no normals pointing in towards the middle of the object. And finally, or almost finally, if I go back into Z, solid view, we've got the shape of the RSJ and it's watertight. We've got an unnecessary edge loop. So if you hold down the Alt key on your keyboard and left click over one of the edges of the centre loop of vertices, it highlights it. And we can delete these just to get rid of unnecessary vertices by pressing X for delete, and then go into the bottom of the options and delete the edge loop, and that removes it from the RSJ. So we've got a shape that looks like an RSJ. It's in proportion. The size isn't correct to real world units, but at the moment we're not worried about that. But there is one other thing we can do. If I go into side view, numpad 3, the RSJ sits below the world origin, and it's always useful to keep the 0 point as the ground level, and we're down below the ground level. In reality they would be set into the ground for stability, but we're just modelling on a ground plane. So the original cube was 2 meters in all directions, so we've got 1 meter sitting below the world 0. So while all the vertices are selected, we can grab those and move them. So you press the shortcut G and move them on the Z axis 1 meter, so number 1 on the numpad, and enter. So we've now got an RSJ with the object origin sitting on the ground plane, or what will be the ground plane of the object that we're going to build. Okay, we don't need the normals indicators showing anymore, so I'll just go into overlays and turn off the view of the face normals, and we're finished really at this stage with the RSJ, and we now need to insert the barn reference image that we created in the last video. So tab back into object mode, and because of the direction that the RSJ is facing, the open front with the apex of the RSJ will be looking down the x-axis, so we need to go into side view, which is numpad 3, and then insert the barn image in that location. And to add the barn image, we open the add menu, which is Shift A, and go down to image, and we'll add a reference image, and then navigate to the barn reference image that we created in the last video, and load the reference image. At the moment it's much smaller than the barn would be, so we can go into the image properties and single image barn reference image RGB as an image. So with it selected, we can then scale this by just dragging the handles to a size that is roughly representative of what you'd expect for a barn. Also grab it and put the bottom of the legs roughly on the ground plane. I would assume the sort of gutter level of the barn would be roughly probably 5 meters, so we just need to grab this and drag it up a little bit more. 5, just a little bit more than that until we're up to, oh, it's going in both directions because I haven't got it set on exactly on the bottom. So again, we'll grab it, bring the RSJ up roughly to the ground, and we've now got roughly 5 meters to the top of the barn. It may be higher than that. We're not concerned at the moment because we'll make all of the dimensions and proportions the same. So we've got the image set with the barn RSJs roughly on the ground plane that we've set for the world view, and we can just now grab the image and move it on the Y axis until the apex sits directly over the Y axis indicator. So the RSJ now, as you can see if we zoom in, is significantly larger than the model that we've created, which is almost 10 times bigger than it actually needs to be. So we'll start now working on the RSJ again and sizing it and positioning it to suit the barn. So first of all, it's better to leave the RSJ's origin on the world origin at the moment for what we're working with. So to do that, we need to tab back into edit mode and make sure that all the vertices are selected. So just press A, which selects all, and then we can grab the RSJ in the Y axis and bring it across roughly central to the end RSJ. As you can see, it's significantly bigger than the reference, so we need to scale it. And what we can do is scale it just on the X and Y axis and leave the height the same as it is. And that you do that by pressing S for scale and then Shift Z, because you're not escape again. We went into cursor select mode in one of the last operations. We now need to be back in median point as the select mode, and that will be the average center of the RSJ. So if we scale to the cursor, then everything will move back towards where the 3D cursor is. The median point is the average point of everything selected. So we can now scale the RSJ and press Shift Z, so you're not scaling on the Z axis but just on the X and Y axis, and then scale it down until it's roughly the same size as what we've got as the front RSJ reference in the image. And again, grab on the Y axis and move it across, and again scale Shift Z just to fit it as best as we can to the reference image, which is fairly poor, but it gives you now the RSJ looking roughly the same size as the reference we're working to. If we now go into wire view, what we need to do is just select the top vertices. So we'll deselect everything, which is Alt A, and then box select the top vertices. We're in wireframe, so all the top vertices will be selected. We can now drag this up vertically by grabbing it again with the G key and then using Z as the axis and bring it up so it sits roughly just below the flashing that's on the side of this portal frame. we're going to put a curved roof on, but the curved roof has also got purlin sitting on top of it, so the top of the curvature will be higher than the top of the RSJ. In fact, if you look at the side view, we're almost spot on with where the purlins sit on top of the RSJ at that point. Just Z and go back into solid. If we just roll the view about, we're half and half at the moment over the reference image. So what I'm going to do is tab back into object mode, select the reference image, and then grab it and move it just behind this RSJ. So we'll grab the reference image on the x-axis, just move it back slightly, because we're only interested at the moment in making this one profile. And again, we'll go back into front view. So we've got our first RSJ in place. The next stage now is to build half of the curve of the roof. Because again, it's easier to model things symmetrically around a center point. So we're using the world origin and z-axis position as the center of the barn. So we'll use the RSJ again, but this time it will be rotated into a curve. So select the RSJ again and tab back into edit mode. And we've already got the top vertices selected, so what we can do is copy these, which is Shift D to duplicate them, and just drag them over towards the centre of the barn a little bit. We now need to rotate them vertically, so the command for rotate is R, so press R on the keyboard and 90 on the numpad for 90 degrees, and then press enter, and we've got the RSJ now facing its across to itself, and we need to position this again just below the flashing on the side of this barn. So if we grab and position it somewhere just below the flashing, we need to get it exactly on the XY0 axis where the Z-axis indicator lies. And one of the ways we can do that is to scale it to the 3D cursor. Because the 3D cursor is sitting exactly on the world origin, we can move this across to where the world origin lies. So we need to go back into the 3D cursor as a pivot point, and this time we want to scale on the y-axis. So again, we'll go S for scale, Y for the axis, and 0, we're scaling it to the 0 point, which is exactly where the 3D cursor lies on that axis, and enter. And we've moved it across so it sits exactly above the world origin. So the next stage will be to rotate the profile of the RSJ that we've just moved out to sit in the correct height in relation to the image that we're working to. Numpad 3 brings you back into the straight on view of the x-axis we're looking down, but we need to now rotate that round to this column, and for that we use the spin tool. So if we click on the spin tool, it brings up a widget which is in the spinning around the Z axis, and again this centers itself on the 3D cursor, so it's always important to have the 3D cursor in the correct position for what you want before you use the spin tool. But you click on the widget and drag it a little bit, and it starts to spin the profile we've put up there, which isn't what we want, because we want to spin it on the x-axis. So in the spin tool box that opens when you activate the spin tool, we've got the numerical input. At the moment Z is set as 1, so that takes all of the rotation, and we want X to be set to 1, so we'll set that to 1, and you'll see the shape change, and we'll set Z to 0 and go to numpad 3 so we can see what's happened. We need to go in the opposite direction with this, so you can put -1 in front of the axis, and we're starting to spin in the right direction, and we can spin further, but you can see that the position where it's ending on the RSJ isn't up at the top of the RSJ, so we need to move the center point, and you've got the option of the adjusting the center axis. Initially set on the 3D cursor, but we can raise it up the Z axis or take it down the Z axis until it looks as though the curve will meet somewhere near the top of the RSJ. Just zoom in so we can again adjust that very slightly to bring it towards the top of the RSJ, and then the angle can be reduced either with the view widget or by just decreasing the angle on the number input. And I'm just going to take this so it's not quite above the RSJ, and none of the lines are meeting together, because we need to cut this now to meet up with the face of the RSJ. And to do that, I'm going to go and back into wireframe view, so it's Z for changing the view, and clicking on wireframe, and we can use the knife tool, and the knife tool works either using the tool button, or if you're in select mode you just press K for knife on the keyboard. It snaps to edges, and there's a few markers at the very bottom of the screen that show you what the knife tool does, and we want to cut through everything. So if you press Z, cut through becomes activated while the knife is in operation. We can then go to the outside, or what will be the inside edge of the vertical RSJ, and it snaps to that. If you then click at that point and drag it vertically, you can see it putting markers on all the other points, and again we'll snap to the vertical RSJ on the same edge above the curved RSJ and click again, and it's put red markers now to say that those are the lines that will be cut. So you just press enter and it cuts them. So at this point the RSJ that curves round has now got another set of lines cut through that marry up with the vertical RSJ, but they're not connected at all. So again, if you go back into the straight on view, numpad 3, and deselect everything, we can now delete these end vertices of the curved RSJ. For that, press C, which is circle select, and just drag a circle over those, right click to accept, and then press X and delete vertices. So that cuts it back to the RSJ. What we have also done though is added a couple more vertices on the vertical RSJ that aren't needed. So if we zoom into those, select the two vertices that the cut through has made, and then press X and dissolve edges. That dissolves the edge between the two vertices and removes the vertices. So again, if I go Z to solid, numpad 3, we've now got the curved half section and the vertical RSJ that makes up half of the front view. So now what we can do is again select all by pressing A on the keyboard. So all the vertices are selected. We're in cursor 3D cursor pivot point mode, and the pivot point's on the center line. So if we duplicate those, copy them, which is Shift D for duplicate, press escape to leave the copy on top of the existing one, and then mirror them across to the other side of the barn, which is Control M for mirror and on the y-axis. So you press Y for the y-axis and you get the mirror image come across to the other side, and then enter to accept that. So we've now got the end profile of the barn. What I'm going to do is just go across to the outliner, and when we started from the cube. So in the outliner we've got the cube object, and we've got an empty object which is the image. Now if the image is in the way of what we're doing, it's very easy to just close the eye icon and remove it from view. So at the moment we've got the first steel structure in place, and as with when we mirrored the profile of the RSJ, the mirror image, the normals are the wrong way around, and it's not joined to the first half of the curved RSJ. So again, we can select all and then press M for merge, for the merge menu, and then again by distance, and it's removed 36 vertices, which will be the vertices around the center join of the RSJ. We can also deselect all and just check that the curved RSJ isn't connected to the vertical RSJ anywhere by just putting the mouse cursor somewhere near a vertex and pressing L for link select, and you'll see that where we cut, we haven't actually joined the vertical to the curved one. We haven't closed the end of the curved one, but that doesn't matter for this form of model where you're just making a model that goes into a scene that's not a CAD representation of a building as such. But you can see it's very easy to build the first profile. What we need to do though is also correct the normals, because whenever you mirror something, the normals then point inside. So again, select all and then Shift N to recalculate the normals. That will correct any shading issues you'll bump into later on when you come to put materials and do the output render, because the computer then knows which is the outside face of an object. So we've got the shape of the barn now on the end view. What we need to do is copy these down the side of the barn. So I'm going to bring the reference image back into view. Just tab out of edit mode into object mode and select the reference image, and in view 7, which is the top view, I'm going to copy the reference image, which is Shift D, press escape, and then rotate it 90 degrees. So it's R for rotate, then 90 on the number keys, and enter. So if we go into front view, numpad 1, we've now got the reference image standing with the front view of the RSJ. So you're looking down the curved RSJ now on the front view. So if we just take the first reference image out of view, you can see we're now looking the opposite 90-degree direction of the reference image. So go back into numpad 1, so you're in front view. With the reference image selected, we can now drag it. So we grab the reference image and move it on the x-axis until the first RSJ lines up with the RSJ that we've created as a 3D model, and that positions it, grab X, so it sits pretty much. There's going to be some differences because we haven't changed the keystone problems that you get, the lens distortions and what have you in the reference image, but it sits near enough on that front edge. What we need to do is line up the RSJs with these other front RSJs on the reference image, and we can use a modifier for that which non-destructively copies the first part part of the model. So if we select again what is the cube object, I'm going to change the name of that, double click on it in the outliner and just call it RSJ. So helps keep it organised. So we've got the RSJ selected, and I'm going into the modifiers tab on the properties window, and we're going to add an array modifier and build an array of the model of the RSJ profile we've created. So it's got a fixed count of 2, and we want 5. At the moment it's going in the wrong direction, but what you can do is it's going along the factor slider. So if we drag that in the opposite direction, you'll see them start to separate and move across. So we line up the furthest one with the RSJ, and we've got all of the legs now in place. So if you go into a 3D view, take away the reference image, again we can see we've built up the first steel part of the structure of the barn. I think this is probably an apt time to stop the tutorial at this point. We've now built the steel frames that will hold the rest of the structure together, and in the next tutorial I'll look at creating the purlins that sit between the steel frame, any bracketry, and the corrugated steel roof. If you're new to Blender and this is the first video of mine you've watched, I'd suggest you go back over the getting started section, which will add more to what I've explained in this, but hopefully I've not gone too fast for you. And as I've said in a few of the other videos, it would help me tremendously if you could subscribe to the channel and like the videos. That's if you do like them. Simply because it helps YouTube show the videos to more people and put suggestions out for more people, and the more views the more people that will get to use Blender. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon with the next video where we'll probably complete this project. Thanks and bye.